Hey guys, welcome to episode 2 of The Creative Cup. I'm super excited to be sitting here with Brandon Brown today. Incredible graphic designer, one of the best IG grids in the game, serial entrepreneur. A lot to talk about with this guy, so we're just gonna jump into it. Creative Cup is a conversation with everyday creatives over good coffee. So let's get into the conversation. Mentioned all the things that you're up to, and it's a lot.
Thank you.
I'm surprised you're not burnt out, but people can go check you out on Instagram. What's your handle there?
This is Brandon.co.
Cool. This is Brandon.co. Highly recommend you guys go check that out. You're doing the seamless grid thing on Instagram, and that's something I'm a huge, huge fan of. It just kind of changes the format of Instagram, and it's really interesting space for creatives to do something special. So how did you get on to that seamless grid thing?
I think I had seen it from a few different pages, and I think for me it was one of those things where you're challenging yourself to think outside of the box with how you present yourself, how you present your brand, your work, or just your everyday life. So, so many creatives, they just take the, the 1200 by 1200 box and just throw out an image, per day or twice a day. But I felt like this way, the way I'd been seeing it, it was really cool just to know that with this format, you don't necessarily need to post like every day. Like now you can actually take the time to detail like, okay, here's what I want to post, for my next 3, and just be able to like try to find some sort of system or strategy about what it is that you want to do around your creative work. So I took that challenge, tried to figure it out, how to do it. Figured out that there were a couple ways to do it, but like once I kind of nailed it, it just kind of, I couldn't stop.
Yeah, that's been my introduction to you. My first episode, I interviewed someone that's basically family to me. My second episode, I'm meeting an internet friend for the first time. I've been following you for a while, huge fan of the seamless grid thing you're doing. But before we dive deep into your other ventures, I want to know, what are you up to right now, other than having one of the best grids in the game? What do you do for work and some of the side projects that are currently running?
So I'm a senior designer at Edelman. That title is kind of expansive. It's not just designer. Designer, sometimes art director, sometimes, most of the time, video editor, sound engineer. Like there's so many like different there's so many different things that happen just within that title, so many different hats. But I've been at Edelman for about 2 years. Love my team. Sometimes I feel like I've been blessed with like one of the best teams. Outside of that, there's Designwise, there's Go Talk, there's Plot Twist Creative, there's Cornerstone Digital. All of these kind of have like their own, their own brand, of course, but their own purpose as well. And they're just kind of like branches of a passion that I've always had. So it's quite a lot.
Yeah, it is a lot, but it's something I was so interested in having you on this because that's how I operate too. Like it's my 9 to 5, it's starting a podcast, it's uploading to Instagram every single day, 14 times a day on stories for me, and then posting to the grid occasionally, like you mentioned. It's that constant drive to be creative and express myself in all of these different alleys and kind of pull in some of my passions that exist outside of being a designer and try to design around those. One thing I think that's super aligned for both you and I is Designwise. You mentioned that in sort of the list of things. Designwise is a page that you have on Instagram and also a website where you're kind of promoting this idea of being a creative, giving perspective on your experience as a creative to maybe a younger creative. It's an amazing page that looks great on Instagram as well, but I think it's offering a ton of value in a way that I'm trying to offer value both through this podcast and on my Instagram. So let's talk a little bit more about Designwise and like what's the ultimate goal with Designwise? How did it start and how do people get involved?
Designwise was birthed out of failure. It was birthed out of a need. just the desire to be mentored. Most of my career, 8 years, I've not really had a mentor, you know, and I felt like kind of slighted by that a bit.
Yeah.
You know, there's so many creatives out here who, it's funny, I just had this conversation this morning, talking about mentors who either just don't have the time, or mentors who give you their time but refuse to give you all of the resources that they may have because they don't want you to become more successful than them. And I've noticed that that's a really big issue within our creative community, and even like from like a smaller sector, it's even a big issue within like the Black community, like Black designers. Like they don't really want to like give you everything because, you know, I don't want you to be as successful as me or surpass me. So it's just like this weird like crab in the barrel mentality that not many people talk about within our community. So I had this idea where, you know, how can I be a resource to young creatives who probably also feel the same thing, but in a much more of a wide stream effect. So instead of just having one-on-one conversations with creatives over coffee, how can I affect a large group of people? And that's kind of what Designwise was. It started off as creative mentorship platform, offering one piece of advice per day, and that piece of advice basically just kind of leading into, you know, mental health or lifestyle as a creative, but we never actually talk about like creative processes, or like we never talk about like Photoshop or Illustrator, because in my opinion, I feel like those things you can learn that all by yourself. But most people aren't teaching you what it is you need to know, you know, in terms of like how to manage yourself as a human being who is a creative. And I think that's kind of like I have a theory that most seasoned creative professionals understand that, and they understand that there are things within creating a sustainable lifestyle as a creative that is what's keeping them successful. And I think those are the things that they're keeping away from us.
That's really interesting. So you talked about the mentorship piece, and that is something you're really offering with this, is kind of this like, not specific to you. I know you have some partners with Designwise, but you as Designwise are offering every creative some sort of mentorship through the content, which I think is, to your point, something that is completely necessary. It's hard to find, and I'm sure in your community, like you mentioned, even harder to find. It's something I've experienced as well. I've been lucky to have a couple great mentors along the way, but also experienced that I'm not going to give you everything because I feel like you're going to keep on pushing. And that's kind of been a drive behind me doing this, is to share what it takes to get somewhere, to get something, to get a finished piece, because you don't often get that from a mentor or from a higher up in these agency roles. Someone just wants you to create the thing and do it to this spec. They don't necessarily want to walk you through the process to get there. And for a young creative breaking into this industry, or not a young creative, someone that is just trying to break into this industry, it becomes daunting, scary, impossible when you don't see the process. All you see is people's portfolio pieces. Like, how the hell am I going to do that? You know, so I think that's really amazing, and I'm a huge fan of Designwise for that reason. You mentioned failure, and that's something that you said Designwise was birthed out of. You have this story on your Instagram. It's one of your highlighted stories. It's probably 15 or 20 segments long, but you talk about your entire journey from breaking into being a creative to the failures along the way, the pivots to get past that, and to where you currently are now, which you say at the very end of it is it's not the end goal yet. Still, there's no end goal. It's kind of the journey is the thing you're chasing, and that's something I believe in too. I want to talk about the failure piece of that though, because I think a lot of people try once, and if they don't succeed, that's it. You know, they're like, I tried to be a designer, I tried to learn Photoshop, I had this job and I got laid off, and that's it. You know, I'm just gonna go do something else now. But I think something that we share in common is that ability to say, that didn't work out, whether it was a side venture you started or a job that you felt super secure in, when it ends, you take everything you learned and you pivot and grow on top of that and build something new. And that's something that you've done time and time and time again, from what I can tell. So talk to me about your perspective on failure and kind of growing past that.
I love failure.
Yeah.
I think as I get older, as I become more mature, I think failure is more important than having success. Success, you live a life of success and you have what you need, you have what you want, but you haven't really learned much because there hasn't really been anything to teach you, you know?
Yeah.
Failure is what helps you to wisen up in the areas that, you know, you're working in. So I can't learn how to build a successful agency if I've never failed at building one.
Yeah.
You know, like those lessons are basically what help you build that success. I think for myself though, I have stopped being committed to reaching an end goal. I think our society is like extremely obsessed with like, you know, so what's the end goal, you know, or what's next for you, or what what's the what are you gonna do when this is all over, or like we're very obsessed with just what it is at the end of that finish line, like what type of trophy are we looking to gain. And I think for myself, man, I've just stopped trying to run that rat race. I watched this TED Talk a while ago about the cult of extreme productivity. And it just kind of touched on the idea that people are so overproductive that they miss out on the journey. They miss out on what's happening in their own lives or what's happening in their friends or family's lives. And so much that you can think you're in one place, but because you've been overproductive, you don't realize how much you've grown. So now the person that you think you are and the person that you really are fighting. Yeah. And there's really not much you can't really assess anything because you're just overworking yourself. So it's like you start failing. And sometimes like there are failures that you know are coming, or I don't want to say know they're coming, but they're failures that you're ready for. Right. And then there are failures that happen that because of negligence or not nourishing yourself properly. And I think those are the ones that, you know, you can learn from those too, but I'd rather just deal with the failures that I know could possibly happen. Totally. But ever since I watched that, I've been like very keen on making sure that I'm not focused on this end goal. Like I want to enjoy this process. And that's the process within work, process within entrepreneurship, process within relationships. Like you can have this idea, you can meet this guy and, you know, see like, oh man, we're going to be business partners. But it's like, hey, just enjoy the journey, you know, enjoy the relationship. You don't have to always be thinking about that end goal. So
I think that I was so interested in talking to you because the list of things you've done or are doing is so big, but you seem to have avoided burnout. And I think maybe that's a big part of it, is not pushing towards something. I think that's how people burn out, is they're not there yet. They're not there yet. They're not there yet.
I wouldn't say I've avoided burnout. I've definitely burnt out a few times. I think in those moments, you know, going back to failure, you know, those moments, you don't know you've burnt out. And I think that's so scary to be, you know, we're talking about overproductivity. It's terrifying to have burnt out and you don't know it. So now you're working yourself in burnout, the same pace that you were when you weren't burnt out. Yeah. And it's like, it's you don't realize like what that can do to your body, what it'll do to your mind. Like you know, I have to make notes about everything because I'm very forgetful. You know, I have to make reminders, or I have friends who, you know, I'm like, hey man, just remind me of this like Tuesday, you know, or almost being in the hospital because you've been burnt out, you know, almost checking yourself in because, you know, your body is not responding the way it should, you know, and I think that's what I'm kind of talking about when it comes to like the difference between those two types of failures. Like that's the type of failure because of negligence.
Right.
You know? So, and those are the types of failures that I'm looking to avoid at all costs.
So would you say self-awareness is kind of the difference between those two?
Self-awareness, self-evaluation. And sometimes just putting stuff down. Like, you know, like right now I'm in this place where I'm so focused on, you know, I'm still freelancing. I still have a job. But I realized that I needed a season of just doing nothing. And people, you know, you meet like these like grinders and like hustlers, and they'll tell you like, well, you're doing nothing. Like you should always be doing something. And it's like, you shouldn't listen to those people. Because those are the people that behind the closed doors, they're probably miserable or they're depressed, or they're the only people that they're working, the only people that they talk to are their clients. You know, like you need to take some time to just rest. And this is the first time in 8 years that I've taken time to rest.
Wow.
I've never rested. I've always had moments of like taking a nap, but like starting off my year saying, you know what, I'm going to focus more on the people around me and helping them and being there for them and just being a good friend. You know, I call my people my tribe. Like I'm gonna focus on them this year. Instead of focusing on myself or hoping that they'll focus on me, you know, and that's kind of where I am right now. You know, so everything is still going. Plot Twist is still going. Cornerstone's still going. Designwise, Goat Talk, those two are kind of like in hiatus right now. But right now, I just want to focus on Brandon. What does Brandon need? Not what do my clients need? You know, making sure that Brandon has what he needs. My friends, my family have what they need. Taking trips, going places, seeing things, living life, you know, doing stuff like this.
Totally. Yeah, you talked about really looking at your tribe, your people, giving back in a way that makes you feel good. And I think that is why I started this show, is I have this desire to be a good creative, to make good work, to put it out, to have a good portfolio piece. But I also want to help people find themselves in that. And I want to give back to a community, and I get just as much enjoyment out of that, out of sharing these kinds of conversations that are so important, just as much value out of that as I do of posting like the best motion graphic I ever made. You know, it's this conversation that's important to me. It's filling your creative cup is it's the name of the show for a reason. It's like just having a 9-to-5 and cranking out agency work. It's creative, but it doesn't fill my creative cup in the same way that like this conversation is going to. And it's that self-awareness, like I mentioned, to say, I need this right now. And I know other people need it right now too. So I think it's really important, both what you're doing with Designwise and what I'm doing with this show is kind of turning the creative conversation around and talking to people about our experience to this point, the bad, the good, the ugly, the beautiful, and how we're growing and learning past that in a way that then we can give back to the community and help other people maybe avoid some of those pitfalls along the way, maybe avoid that season of depression that I know both of us have faced, you know, how to handle a layoff, stuff like that, the inevitable, the failures that you're talking about you may know are coming, the failures you may know are not. I think when you start to have these conversations and talk about the mental health side of being a creative, it is so important, just as important as the best portfolio piece.
Definitely.
You know, being at a big agency and winning awards is awesome. But what are you doing when you go home? Is that filling your creative cup? Did you go to school to do, work on a brief for someone else, or are you secretly wishing you could do your own thing? And this show is kind of my own thing, and it feels really good. It's filling my creative cup in that way. So
yeah, I want to touch on that real quick, because one of the things that I've also learned this year, just talking about the portfolio work, I can say that I feel blessed to be in a position where I just don't care about the work anymore. Like, I know it's going to be good. And I don't know if you feel that way sometimes, where it's just like, it's one, for me now, it's one thing that I can take off my list of things to be stressed about, because I know it's going to be good. And that's not just coming from myself. That's even just walking into work every day. And you know, I've told my few people on the team before, the designers that I work with, like, hey, the work is going to be good, regardless. Mm-hmm. That's why we got hired, because we're good at what we do. Yep. How are you? Let's focus on the team. Let's focus on the chemistry. Mm-hmm. Let's focus on the morale. You know, because at the end of the day, that's really all that matters. Mm-hmm. How are you as a person growing? Yeah. Or as a creative growing? You know, and I think we get so focused on the work, our portfolios, and you know, man, if I get this client, like how it's gonna affect my portfolio and how people view me and see my work. And it's like, at the end of the day, like, yeah, that's great, but it really doesn't matter much if you're not aware of who you are, where you are. People, you'll just have another notch on your belt. So I really think my biggest desire now in working with creatives, and even just like, you know, every once in a while I'll sit down with a creative and we'll just grab coffee. I just want them to see that if you continue to study and you continue to practice, you're going to be good. Mm-hmm. You're going to be a good designer. That part is the easiest part. Yeah. It's so easy to be good. Yeah, yeah. It takes time, but it's easy. Mm-hmm. You know, it's how are you as a person that you need to work on. That's amazing. Yeah, I have always not chased being the best at a skill. Yeah. Because like you said, that's pretty easy. Like, I can go on Skillshare, I can go on YouTube, I can learn how to set keyframes, but it's much harder to have the conversation, to have the self-awareness, and those are the kind of, I've been positioning it as EQ over IQ. And I think that works in the creative space a little different, IQ being the skill sets that it takes to make something great. Like, you gotta have a little bit of both, but to your point, the IQ part's pretty easy. There's endless resources to get good at a skill. People aren't focusing as much on the other side of it, which is in you, in the relationships you have with people. So I love that we're so aligned on that mission. And again, that's a huge reason I wanted to have you on, just because I see you pushing forward in the same way and bringing to light that conversation. I want to take a quick break. We're going to reset the camera that just shut off, and then we'll jump back into the conversation. Cool. Hey guys, Nick Fish here, your host. Just want to jump in real quick and say, in the second half of this podcast, I had some trouble with the audio. My hair rubbed against the microphone quite a bit, so if you hear a change in the audio, that's why. Thanks for tuning in. Enjoy the second half of the conversation. Like half a year, and I was like freelancing and being a barista for a while, and like I loved it. Yeah. I loved it, but I ended up being more of a barista than a freelancer, which leads perfectly back into the conversation. Right. We'll pick it up here. I was talking before the break about, we were talking about your job, your 9-to-5 job. And you mentioned earlier in the conversation how Designwise, Goat Talk were on a bit of a hiatus. Yeah. And that's something I'm figuring out. I uploaded this Instagram story a while ago where I compared it to juggling. Yeah. And how, like, most people can learn to juggle 3 balls that are the same size. Like, I know how to do that, but when it's like 8 hours of work as a basketball, and then your family is like 4 hours, and you got to balance that, so that's like a softball. But then we have this tiny bouncy ball that is the time we give to our passion projects. And when you start to juggle that, like, you're always going to drop the smallest thing first, because it's the hardest thing to keep your eye on. And for me, that's always the passion projects. That's why this podcast has lived in a notebook for 2+ years, and I just kind of lose sight of it. But
I'm finding out how to keep my eye on that and pick it back up, but how to also not over-index on that and to make sure I'm showing up at my 9 to 5, because that's what pays the bills. It's what has gotten me to this point. So I have to make sure that I'm still showing up, but I also find it so important to keep my eye on that passion project. And if it falls, that I have to pick it up, or I'm not going to feel 100% fulfilled, because juggling 2 balls is not nearly as cool looking as juggling 3, right? So like being a well-rounded person, having passion and family and work is so important to me. Even though Goat Talk and Designwise are on hiatus, and you mentioned that was a little more personal, how do you find the time to like pick back up a passion project, or even to just like keep your eye on it and be self-aware enough to know that like one day I will pick it back up?
Yeah, I think that last part is what it is. It's always going to be there. You know, like you put it down, and if you have to take care of something, whether it be yourself or the people around you, just knowing that it's always there for you to pick back up anytime you want is probably the easiest part. I think what happens is like we get this anxiety that like if we put it down, it's just going to vanish. Right. But it's ours. So it can't go anywhere if it's yours. And or I'll even go further. I think people get anxiety that they'll put it down and it won't become important to them anymore. I think that's probably like the biggest fear. And you just have to, I think what I've noticed for me is if it still is important to you after you put it down, that means it's for you. If it's not important to you after you put it down, it probably was never important to you to begin with. It was just exciting. Yeah, it was just fun. It's kind of like my mom told me this thing a while ago. Like, if you want to buy something in the store, don't buy it right away, because the excitement of buying it is just fresh. Right. Take a couple days. If you still want to buy it after a few days, go buy it. That must mean at some point you see it fulfilling some area or small area of your life. And that's kind of how I feel about passion projects. Like, I don't think passion projects are something where it's different than a job, but it still holds the same value. You just need to always remember that it's there anytime you're ready for it again. And that's kind of how I feel about Designwise and Go Talk. Like, I think this right here will probably help inspire me to go back and continue doing it. I don't think I've really stopped. I've stopped doing it from an internet perspective. You know, like I'm still mentoring creatives. I may not post about it. I just don't think it's necessary. We still go get coffee. I just don't think it's necessary to post about it. It's just like from the area of what people see, that part has kind of calmed down. I'm still having conversations, maybe not over a mic, but they're still there. So in a way, like, my passion project hasn't really died. The broadcast of my passion project has been put on hold.
That's awesome, because it makes me feel a little better about this living in a notebook for years, because I was working on it. Whether it manifested into a filmed thing that was edited and uploaded or not, like, I was working on something for myself. And I think that's so important. The other side of that equation, though, was showing up at work. Like, it's so important that we don't get so hung up on this passion project that we stop giving 100 or 110% to the job that put us in this position to talk about being a creative, the job that pays the bills. Is it the kind of putting down of the passion projects or on the back burner of the passion projects that allows you to show up at Edelman and be the best creative and be a great leader? Or do you have any other like tips, tricks, advice for people on really giving your all to that 9 to 5, but also making sure that the other pieces of your life stay fulfilled?
I think my mistake was bringing my passion projects into work. I think, you get so excited, and your passion projects are so important to you that you kind of start spilling those things over into your job. and maybe that's not a bad thing initially, but after a while, you start to kind of blur the lines of like the value you put within your job and the value you put within your passion project. And now you're in the middle of a deadline, thinking about, what it is, you're trying to do in your passions, or you're working on your passions while at the office. And I made that mistake. And I don't think, at first I didn't think it harmed anyone or myself. It's just quick, like a quick little, like, oh, I need to make this edit, or, put this post out real quick, or schedule this post. And again, at first you don't see it as a problem, but after a while you start noticing that people are watching.
Totally.
Yeah. And you always want to make sure that you let people know through what you do that this is important. So sometimes it's best just to, it's hard. Sometimes it's best just to schedule some time outside of, and it's okay if like you don't get out what it is you need or feel like you need to get out at that specific time. Try not to blend that line. When you're at work, be present. Make that the priority. When you're doing your passion project, make that the priority at that time.
Taught me something. Yeah, that just taught me something, because without realizing it until you said it in such plain words, like I've done that. I had this desire to start a vlog, and I was like, oh, I'm at work all the time, it'll be a work vlog.
Right.
Like no one here wants to be in my vlog, so it failed. And then like I'm like running around with the camera and like not showing up and doing my job 100%. Like
just being present.
It's that separation of the two that I think is important for a creative when you're trying to keep bringing up the name of the show, fill your creative cup. I think it's important to realize that doesn't always come from your creative 9 to 5, and bucketing it out, I think is super important. And you talked about scheduling time for it. And I think that is what finally allowed me to separate work and this passion project. Was I scheduled the first episode, I put it on a calendar for a Saturday. And then right after that I scheduled this one, and the next one is already scheduled. So I know when I'm at work this week that next Saturday I've got another thing coming. And I'm gonna show up at work and do my job for my clients all week, knowing that at the end of the week that passion project is there. I'm gonna pick it up, I'm gonna run with it and give both of those things 110% and not let one slip into the other. It's really important, like you said, to not blur those lines between the two. And I think a lot of people end up, not a lot of people, some people are fortunate enough where the passion project becomes the thing that's monetized, and they do it. You look at YouTubers and you think like, oh my God, how do I get that? They're filming and they're running around and doing that. It's their passion project and they make money out of it, but that's not often the case. We have to show up and do our 9 to 5 and pay the bills, and bucketing that out and making sure that you're fulfilled in every space, I think, is kind of the answer.
And it's not easy.
No.
I mean, I think as creatives, we're so used to running to the most exciting thing, and we just have to, I think sometimes our issue in society is that instead of practicing discipline, we'll just fall into whatever it is that we're doing. So like if we're always focused on the next exciting thing, that means we're not practicing discipline to bucket those items, right? Like we're always just like, oh man, I want to start a podcast. I'm going to start a podcast now. I'm going to do it right now. And now you're at work, trying to you're not even there, you're thinking about this podcast you're going to start. And the next thing you know, you're like, I'm going to start a vlog. So now not only are you not prioritizing the work that you're doing, now you stop prioritizing the podcast that you want to do. Now you're focused on this vlog, and now you're like at work again thinking about the vlog that you want to do. You started a podcast. Now you're not doing really that anymore because now you're focused on the vlog. And then now you're like, oh man, I want to start a creative agency. So now there's like 3-4 items now that and it's just like you're not taking the time to just practice discipline in that area of focus. Like one of the best pieces of advice that I've learned about like prioritizing and focusing is that not every idea that you have is yours. Sometimes the ideas that you have, like we're always going to have great ideas. We're creatives. It's who we are. but that doesn't mean it's yours.
Yeah.
You may have people around you that are looking for ideas that it could be theirs. I think we have this issue where every single idea that we come up with, it must mean it's mine.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna be the one to fulfill it. I'm gonna be the one to bring it to life. It's gotta be me.
Yeah, exactly, and it kind of, it provides all of this pressure on yourself to fulfill every single idea. Like, if you really think about that, it's like there's no way you could fulfill every single idea you have. Mm-hmm. There's no human. There's no human that could literally say every idea that I have, I'm just gonna do it.
Totally.
You have to give it. Mm-hmm. I don't think we're meant to be holders of our own ideas. I think many times there are ideas that fit the narrative that our journey, mm-hmm. but there are some ideas that were not meant for us, that maybe we're supposed to pass on to someone else.
Yeah.
I just think we need to practice better discipline and focusing and prioritizing ourselves and what we're doing now.
Love it.
So I could go on prioritizing
I could talk about
all day.
I could talk about that forever too. Because that's, I mean, I'm figuring it out. Like, I'm not gonna like put this podcast down and be like, I'm an expert on it. I've got it. Like, I don't. Like, it's hard. Like, I'll slip and not show up for my fiance sometimes. I'll slip and not show up for work sometimes because this is important. Or in 2 weeks, I might not film an episode of this because work is going to be over-indexing. But it's having the discipline, like you said, to focus on that bucket, focus on this bucket, and not just let it fall. I think that's so important. Some of the buckets that you do have going right mm-hmm. now, not the ones that are on the back burner. Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
What is currently on the front burner for you? What are you really pouring discipline into and growing?
Plot Twist Creative right now is Plot Twist was kind of birthed out of a need to break out of a box. Just working in corporate, you find yourself always just working within like the confinements of what you can do. Mm-hmm. And I think Plot Twist for us is a way to just be creative without rules or regulations or limits, and it's create our own projects or working with clients that understand our brand pillars and understand our brand message, and they want to work with people or us who maybe think a little differently. Mm-hmm. Like for me, I'm working on a pretty big branding project right now for a music exec, and for me it's cool because when I do brand projects, branding is my passion. I love brand identity. When I do these branding projects, I tend to ask questions that are a little unorthodox within that first consultation, and I've always done that, but I've kind of merged that into the process of Plot Twist and making sure that everything that we continue to do is still a little bit more abstract than most. So like, instead of asking questions like, I'll still ask those questions too, but like I'll ask questions more so geared towards like it feels like a therapy session. It's like, tell me about your family.
Yeah.
Where do you live? What type of house did you buy? Mm-hmm. What's the color scheme in your home? What type of car do you drive? Like, most of these questions, they seem kind of surface. Right. But you don't know, for me, that this is helping me to build a brand that is specifically for you and the lifestyle that you already have. Instead of just like, tell me some brand names or some brands that you inspire you. You know what I mean? Like,
build a Pinterest board.
Build a Pinterest board. Exactly. Like, I love asking questions that you weren't necessarily you prepared for, questions that can sometimes, and it's funny, like some of these questions, like they'll lead to like stories about their childhood, mm-hmm. stories about their family dynamics, or like their pieces of their career like that are vulnerable to them. Like, the point of these consultations for me is to get you talking about things that you weren't expecting to talk about. And the entire time, I'm making notes about your character so that I can infiltrate that into your brand.
It's amazing.
So it's like, it's really fun, because it does feel like you're a therapist at times, but it's a cool process that isn't normal. And it kind of, again, like, I didn't realize how similar that process is is so, it almost felt like even before Plot Twist started that it was Plot Twist itself, like just doing things abnormally to reach to reach an end goal that's a bit more personal to you and your brand. So we've been working on that for maybe a year. We kind of, again, not doing much broadcasting, just taking clients privately and, just working with them and, just trying to build something strong without the need to always say, hey, look what we're doing, Right. I don't think that exhibits strength. No.
It's like people only showing off portfolio pieces, which I talked about in my last episode. I'm super into process, and I know you are too, and I'd rather show that because then people can see how I got there when I do post a piece. I think that's so important, and I think it seems to me that something that you've been gifted with is self-awareness. And what's really interesting about what you just said with Plot Twist is how you're able to take this engine that you have of self-awareness and put that on people in these consultation things where you're really bringing human back into this design world. It's not answer brief, make the sexiest thing that you can make and then show it off to the world and hope it wins awards. It's like, let me get to the core of who you are. I want you to understand who I am. And if that relationship is good, we're gonna make kick-ass work because we really understood each other as humans on this level. And I know what you need and what you want and what you didn't get. And I think that's so important and something that's kind of lost in the agency world maybe, and sounds like something you're getting a lot out of Plot Twist. So that's awesome. And some of the work I have seen from it does exhibit that in a great way.
Thank you.
It's that, man, so many people need to hear that though, about not always broadcasting everything. I think that's so important to people that don't have something to broadcast to hear that, or someone that is just always broadcasting everything to hear that too.
Social media at some point became a priority, and it's really scary because it really is just a tool to broadcast what you want people to see that you're doing, or what you want people to perceive that you're doing. And I think for me, it's gotten to this place where I just don't care as much anymore about broadcasting anything. More so like the process of things, less of the final product. Or I just think we need to kind of come back to the core of like why it is we're doing what we're doing, and it's not to broadcast those things and say, hey, look what I've done. It's self-fulfillment. That kind of goes back to that conversation I had, at work, where it's just like I'm fulfilled already. I don't need the validation or the broadcast of validation. Like, I don't need it anymore.
The step before that bothers me even more is the person that says, coming soon, about to do this, look forward to this.
Announcements.
It drives me nuts. Like, let's just see it when it's there. I didn't talk about the Creative Cup before the first episode came out. Even though it lived in a notebook for 2 years, I wasn't plugging and promising anything. Because then I think when you put it out there that you're about to do this thing, you open yourself up to just this world of expectations, external expectations that that's not what I'm doing it for. I don't want to put it out there and be like, look for this soon. This is for me, 100%. And putting it out there in the world for sure does scratch an itch in that I want to help people find themselves in that. But it's not about me getting views on this. I haven't checked the view count on a single Instagram story I've uploaded this past year. I haven't looked at the view count on the first Creative Cup episode. It's all about me making it, having this conversation, editing it is so fun for me, and I'm not gonna tease to the world like this is gonna be the best episode of the Creative Cup ever. Like, I'm all about documenting the process, so I will put it up and say, hey, I'm setting up for the interview right now, but I'm not gonna set this expectation that's so external because then it's not for me. And I think ultimately it sounds like that's both why you and I exist in this creative world and do stuff outside of work, is to just satisfy ourselves and to not really care what other people think about any piece of that.
I've learned I learned the hard way that announcements kill momentum way before you even start. Because what you're doing is like you said, you're putting these external expectations, or people are putting these external expectations on you. And now, even though you had to deliver before, you have to meet their expectations, and you don't know what they are.
Yeah.
I have a lot of friends who are artists or musicians, and those are like some of my favorite people. But the issue with them is that there's always announcements. And then what's worse is there's announcements for announcements.
Yep.
Where I've literally seen posts that say, "Can't wait to share with you guys what's going to be happening Friday." And I'm like, you just make an announcement about an announcement. Like just let it happen. Just let it happen. Like you don't even need to announce it on Friday. It doesn't have to be. It's just, hey, this happened. But the idea that people feel like I don't know what that is yet. And sometimes I'll be a bit of a hypocrite as well. Sometimes I fall into that and I don't realize it until late.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can't believe I did that.
I think sometimes it's like trying to beat yourself to the piece of content being ready. For me, sometimes I'm like, it's going to take me 3 days to edit this and get it up. I want to talk about it now. I'm so excited about it. But that comes from a place within as well. Like, I'm not putting it out there because I hope that everyone comes and views it. The even worse part of it for me is when people tag every single creative friend on this thing and they're like, get ready for the drop on Friday. It's like, please don't tag me in this. Immediate remove tag. Like I just want to see it when it's there. And if it's good, I'll keep watching. And it's for me, ultimately, at the end of it.
I think I did it because I wanted to make sure that I put it out.
There is a little bit of that, like the accountability thing too. Like, I mean, people do that on YouTube. They're every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then it's like, shit, I gotta upload. It's Wednesday, And I set a goal for myself initially, like I want to put one of these out every week, but I might not, you know. And I think another piece of what I'm trying to do is be vulnerable enough that even when I am sharing the process or the finished piece, that I'm going to talk about how it's not perfect. Like the camera shut off in the middle of this. I couldn't remember what I was going to say at all. That's what it takes to get one of the top podcasts, if this is what I want out of this, or to share my perspective with people, is I'm going to fumble, I'm going to slip up. And if I'm vulnerable enough and put that out, that external expectation thing doesn't exist, because people are like, oh, he screwed up. It's not going to be the best episode. The lighting on this is kind of shit, but he's trying, he's doing it, he's actually doing it. And that's something, getting out of this box, getting out of notebooks and just making something has 100% been self-driven. Like, I want to do this, I don't care what you think, I'm not going to announce it. If it's imperfect, I'm still going to put it out because it makes me feel good to just start doing it. I'll improve along the way. The external expectations are bound to come eventually. If you grow an audience, people are going to look for you, look to you for something specific. But I think it always has to come from that place within. That's why this show is called The Creative Cup. It's about your version of being a creative. It's about what fills that up for you, not everybody else, not doing award-winning work. If that's what it takes to fill your creative cup, is to win an Addy, to win something like that, then cool, go for it. But it's that self-awareness and vulnerability piece that I don't see a lot of, and that I want to see more of, because I think it avoids that mental health conversation, it avoids the burnout, the depression, the getting laid off because you were blurring the lines and not doing your job. I think I want to see more of that, and that's why I love Designwise and Goat Talk, is it's really opening up that side of being a creative as well.
I'm excited for the revitalization of Designwise and Goat Talk. Goat Talk more specifically, because we are going to start really having some conversations that are just difficult to have. Things that are personal to us, things that we've been dealing with in this time of like not doing anything, but then just really talking about, you know, just things that I think us as creatives were a little scared to talk about. I think the best medicine for us is to hear someone else's you know, trials and tribulations and, like, you know, the issues that they may be going through or have gone through, and it helps us to realize that, like, we're not, you know, going through things on our own, you know, like, you know, or it's okay to stop everything you're doing to focus on yourself and your people. So I'm really excited to get that going again. You know, it's going to be tough.
Yeah.
Just having that conversation, but it's necessary. It's necessary for myself, for my co-host. It's necessary for the people listening. So,
love that. Well, I can't wait for it. We're not going to promise and plug anything. To our point we just made, I'm not going to be like, everybody look out for that coming soon. I'll announce it in 2 weeks, but I love it, and anyone that's having that kind of conversation, I want to have them on the show and have those super difficult, tough conversations, and I think we've done a lot of that in this episode. So I honestly think this might be a great place to end it, and people have a lot to look forward to about these conversations. People have an internal or a dialogue that they can then continue for themselves about, how am I filling my creative cup? Am I blurring the lines? I really appreciate this conversation, man. I've honestly learned a lot from you and the things you've said back to me, and I hope that this show, like I said, really does continue the conversation for other people. It has them take it internally and figure out what it is that they need to be doing or should be doing or want to do.
Yeah.
And you're kind of living the dream in a lot of ways of that self-awareness of, I'm going to do this now, this later, and eventually do this. And I just appreciate that so much. So people can find you on Instagram, your personal Instagram that we mentioned at the beginning of the show, links out to all the other side projects for people to go check those out. Thanks for being on the show, man.
I appreciate you for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That's another episode of The Creative Cup. Thanks for tuning in, guys.